Have you ever had a moment where somebody was telling you something that wasn't quite true? I had a friend who told me that somebody else was saying things about me behind my back that weren't quite true. And if you've ever had that happen to you where somebody's spreading rumors about you, especially rumors that aren't even true, you know that that is really, really hurtful. I ended up getting really, really upset, and I ended up going and confronting this other person. And this other person was a friend of mine, and I was really angry, and I started to yell at him. And what ended up happening is that this friend knew nothing about what I was talking about. And what was really happening was the original friend that I was talking to, who was telling me this other person was saying these things behind my back, was actually the one sharing this rumor. And in the end, because I got super angry and I started to yell at this other friend, not only did I lose one friend who was saying things about me behind my back, but I really upset another one of my friends. And in the process, I ended up losing 2 friends that day. And this is really what can happen when we get super angry. And that's what we're going to talk about, because in this series that we're in right now, we're talking about our feelings. And the fact that when we feel things, any kind of emotion, we need to understand that sometimes those feelings, they're just not true. And so today, I want us to focus on anger. And so I want you to take a moment and I want you to think about the last time that you got really angry about something. It could have been when you got a bad grade on a test, when your parent punished you for something, or when your dog destroyed something that you really loved. Take a second and think about that time right now. Now, if you're anything like me, you probably didn't have to think too long about the last time that you are angry. And that's because anytime we get upset, it is so easy for us to jump right into anger. Anger is just natural to us. But when it comes to understanding how our feelings work and ultimately how we follow God through our feelings, we need to understand how to honor God with our anger. Because in the end, God gave us all of our feelings. Everything that we feel was put into us by God, but there's a specific and intentional way that God wants us to use those feelings. And the problem with anger is that anger can actually be really destructive. Anger has the ability, just like I talked about with my friends, to completely destroy relationships. Whether it's with your friends, whether it's with your family, or whether it's just people you don't know super well or people that you're getting to know in the first place. Anger has the ability to just destroy things. And so how we handle anger matters. Not just for us, but it matters to God. And so last week we started off by looking at a verse that's found in a letter written by a guy named Paul. And this letter is called Colossians. And so let's go ahead and look at Colossians chapter 3, verse 12. It says this: "Since God chose you to be the holy people he loves, you must clothe yourselves with tender-hearted mercy, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience." And so what Paul's talking about in this verse is really about how do we react when we start to feel emotions. So in this passage, there's a couple different words that I want to focus in on. And those 2 words are when Paul talks about how we should respond with gentleness and kindness. Now, when it comes to being angry, these are 2 things that are probably really hard for us to embrace, because anger drives us to action. When we feel angry, we want to go. We want to do something. We want to jump into a situation. But the problem is that when we respond to anger that way, when we jump into a situation without taking time to pause, reflect, and look at what's going on, generally when we jump without looking, we're going to experience pain. And so the thing that we really need to know today is that when you feel anger, choose to respond with kindness and gentleness. And you might ask yourself, all right, so what do you mean by kindness and gentleness? Really what that means to us is if you're taking a situation or a scenario where you are feeling anger, take a moment to pause, stop yourself, and ask yourself this question: why am I angry? What's hurt me so much that I am feeling anger towards a person? understand what's causing the anger, and then understand what kind of conversation you need to have. But before you have that conversation, make sure you've taken a moment to calm your initial anger down enough that you can speak to a person in a kind way. It doesn't mean that you should just completely forget or shove aside everything you felt, but when you go to talk to someone, make sure you're talking to them in a way that is kind and caring and shows that you want to value the relationship that you have with someone. See, anger, when we respond with it, generally is a fight. It's what happens when we come up against someone else. But when we take a moment to say, why am I angry? And how can I respond with kindness and gentleness? We approach people saying, there's something wrong here. That really upset me. It made me angry, but I care about the relationship we have. I care about what we feel and experience together in our own relationship. And so I want to know what's going on. If I had responded that way when I had found out that I had a friend who was saying things behind my back, I probably wouldn't have lost my friends because we would have been able to talk about what was really happening. And as much as this is important and good information, for those of us who are wanting to follow Jesus, this isn't just something that is good advice. This is actually us choosing to become more like Jesus. See, in the book of Matthew, Jesus talks about himself in a couple different ways, but one of the ways that he talks about himself is as being gentle. One example of where Jesus calls himself gentle is actually found in Matthew chapter 21, verse 5. And he says this to a crowd. He says, "Here comes your king, gentle and riding on a donkey." And Jesus said this to a whole crowd of people, and it was kind of different. It was a little odd. People weren't really expecting Jesus to behave this way. And the reason is because what people wanted Jesus to do was to react with some anger. Because the people that Jesus was talking to at this time, they had been living under the rule of this nation that was doing a lot of really awful things to them. They were forcing them to pay tons of money that they shouldn't have had to pay. They were making it so that they couldn't do things the way that they wanted to or that they've done for a long time. And a lot of people were really upset about the way that this government had come in to run things. And so a lot of people were expecting Jesus to come in and start this war and overthrow this government. But instead, Jesus showed a different way to react to the things that are upsetting. He did this by choosing to be kind and by being gentle. And this is what we get to do when we follow Jesus. We have the opportunity to live the same way. And when we feel anger, to react in the same way that Jesus did. So this week, when you get angry, I want you to take a moment and pause. Think about what's upsetting you, what's causing you to feel anger in the first place, and then think about how can you respond with gentleness and with kindness. And when we do this, not only are we honoring other people and ourselves, but we're living a life that looks like Jesus and showing Jesus to the world around us.